Hello there. Today we are reading two books about obsessive characters, people who are spiraling, who are losing it, who are going off the deep end. We have Hard Copy by Fien Veldman. This is the story of like a classic contemporary woman who's in love with the printer at her office job. And then we also have Just Watch Me by Lior Torenberg. This is about a woman trying to raise money for her comatose sister by doing a Twitch streamathon. I started with this book. I've already read this book. I'm going to tell you everything that happens in it. This is not out yet. This comes out January 20th, 2026. I got this in the mail from Simon & Schuster. Thank you, Simon & Schuster. And I immediately devoured it. I was so excited about this book. I love this premise. She's doing a fucking streamathon and she's eating spicier and spicier peppers. What the hell is going on? I also think this is perhaps the most beautiful book that I've ever seen in my life. And maybe some of you are going to rake me over the coals for that, but I don't care. I think the absolute undeniable gorgeousness of this cover did make me want to read it. And I don't regret that. I really enjoyed this book and I'm going to tell you everything about it. So if you want to wait until January to know what happens in Just Watch Me by Lior Torenberg, skip this part and go to the review. This opens with our main character, Dell, and she is working at a smoothie bar when a customer comes in and he asks her to replace the peanut butter in a smoothie with almond butter. And she says, okay, that'll be a $3.50 charge. And he berates her because why the fuck is that a $3.50 charge? And she just can't handle it. There's a lot going on in her life. And you know that before you even know the details. There's obviously something up with Dell. She tosses him the entire jar of almond butter, and then as he's like yelling at her, she's like, do you want to go get a coffee? And he's like, what? No. And then she just walks off the job and leaves this smoothie bar untended. Her boss calls her not even 5 minutes later and is like, I can see on the cameras that you've walked out. What the hell is going on? And she's trying to explain that this guy was being really rude to her. And he says to her, I don't care if this guy tried to shoot up the store. You're not allowed to leave. And she goes, I'm not allowed to leave if someone tries to shoot up the store? Already I'm sold on this book, right? It's funny, it's weird, it has interesting characters who I want to learn more about. I will say that in this conversation with her boss where he is firing her, it's a little bit clunky in how heavy the exposition is. Like, you know, when characters are telling each other things that the other person already obviously knows, or even like he's telling her things about herself. Like he's saying, your sister is in the hospital in a coma and you've only worked here 2 months. And it's like, I think she knows that. I understand that you're saying it so that we can learn it, but it's not the best way of going about it. This is an issue that I often see in books and it always really grinds my gears, but fortunately it's something that typically only happens in the first little bit of a book. You don't really need a ton of exposition later on in the story. So while it bothered me here, it wasn't an issue that I had throughout the entire book, and it's not something that I look back on the book and think about as being a problem with it. This is also a debut, and I feel like that's pretty forgivable for a debut. I think that it would have altered my experience a little bit more if I hadn't already been so sold on the premise and the first couple scenes in the book. Because you get such a strong first impression of this story and the tone and the character, this isn't a deal breaker, though it is a little bit annoying. Dell has now been fired from this job that she really needs because, like we said, her sister is in the hospital and they live in America. She goes to her apartment, but she walks past her own door and instead just lets herself into her neighbor Lee's apartment where she steals food and the two of them share a joint. From frame one meeting Lee, it's clear that Lee is Dell's sense of stability. And you know, in a story like this kind of like weird girl lit fic, which I know is like derogatorily used now, but I think this fits into the genre very well without being derivative of other stories in this genre. You know that Lee is either going to be a grounding force for Dell or someone who she falls out with and then that pushes her further into her spiral. We do learn here that Dell uses Lee's bathroom and has a key to Lee's apartment because Dell's apartment is technically the master closet from Lee's apartment. It is a windowless room with a sink and nothing else. For the first month of living in this apartment, she would go downstairs to the 24-hour gym, which she bought a membership to, but then the bathroom closed and she had nothing. She needed to take a shit. She had nowhere to go. So she knocked on Lee's apartment and then they became friends. And Lee has been very open and welcoming to Dell, literally saying, you can come into my apartment and use my bathroom whenever, which is like the craziest setup I've ever heard of. That can't be real. Is that really what it's like in New York City? After we get to see Dell and Lee's dynamic, Dell goes home to her windowless box that's filled with plants that she sells online to richer people in New York. And she's trying to sell these plants and really trying to get some money. She can't pay her rent, which is due in like a week and a half, when she thinks to herself, you know what? I'm just going to start a live stream. She loves watching live streams. She gets on what is called livecast and is obviously Twitch. And she just starts streaming. And of course, there's like 1 or 2 viewers. She tests out like 30 different titles for her stream before finally giving in and making the title Raising Money for My Sister Who's in a Coma. That title gets her like 4 or 5 viewers. And her viewers notice that her space is filled with plants. And they pledge money to her for her to eat some of the jalapenos off of her jalapeno plant. And this is the start of it all. In here, she also tries to sell her plants through the online marketplace listing to the people in her stream, but when she posts the link, she realizes that her full name is attached to it. So she takes it down really quickly, but the 3 or 4 people who are in here do now know her entire name, which is Odelia Danvers. She eats, I think, 4 or 5 jalapenos. This gets her quite a few more viewers. I think she's like hovering around 10 now, which is honestly crazy for your first ever Twitch stream. I feel like that's a really hard market to break into. And this book doesn't pretend like it's easy, but it also does acknowledge that being a beautiful young woman and causing pain and suffering to yourself is going to get you more views. She makes $23 off of these 4 jalapenos, and that's enough for groceries. And she feels like that's honestly fucking crazy. Like, she never thought that she would actually be able to make money doing this. And now it's happening. So she kind of decides, without ever really deciding on page, she's going to do a streamathon. I think that was interesting. A lot of her decisions in this book, we are very deliberately and carefully walked through. This takes place over 7 days. So it's like really sometimes monotonous details, repetitive details of these 7 days. There are these mundane decisions that she makes in her day-to-day life that we get to see the entire thought process behind, but that isn't true of this pretty big, risky choice to do a streamathon. Partway through this night, she sells one of her plants to a guy, and for a second she's like, is that somebody from the stream? And she's like accusing them of being the guy who's bought this plant, but she realizes there were only like 3 people in the stream at the time, and what are the chances that one of them lived in New York and is now buying a plant from her? But when she goes down to the lobby of her apartment to give him this plant, it's a little bit weird and creepy. She hands it over to him, and he doesn't even really look at it. He's just staring at her, and he's kind of like, how's your night going tonight? Oh, how old is this apartment building? Like, trying to keep her there, trying to make conversation with her. And she just slowly backs away, closes the door, and looks over her shoulder as he's still standing out there watching her go up the stairs. Her viewers are pushing her to eat spicier and spicier peppers. They want her to eat a habanero, so she takes them to Whole Foods, where she habitually steals from, except this time is, of course, the time where she gets caught stealing. She gets taken back into the security office in the back, and they call the police, and then she books it out of there. And this whole drama gets her like 5 to 10 more viewers. She has this very strong on-screen persona where she almost bullies people into donating money to her. Like, she has this goal that she speaks of kind of vaguely, that she's trying to raise $14,000 so that her sister, who is in the hospital in a coma, can have private treatment for a week because the doctors at the hospital don't think she's going to improve and want to pull the plug. Okay, she's trying to raise $14,000 for that. She won't really talk about it. She won't really talk about Daisy at all. But what she will do is say, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you donating? She will block someone if they don't donate enough money. She'll say, don't you care about my sister? Don't you care about a good cause? She's very confident and mean and unapologetic, and this is drawing more people in. And that specific persona really clashes with this desperate delusion that she has, that you recognize as delusion, that one more week of care is going to save her sister's life. It's a delusion that is not unfamiliar in stories of family members who are comatose or who are pronounced brain dead, where like she has this mantra that's like, I saw her hand move. She's still in there. And though she's constantly repeating that to herself and convincing herself that Daisy will live, that Daisy will wake up, you never believe that's true. And you never believe that this goal that she has of raising $14,000 is going to get her what she wants, which is her sister. On top of dealing with the fact that her younger sister is in a coma, she's also dealing with her mother, whose one daughter is in a coma and whose other daughter will not answer her relentless, constant texts and calls. And on top of all of that, she has like a stomach ulcer or something of the sort, something that makes it really hard for her both to eat and to be hungry, something that, of course, makes it really hard for her to eat spicy peppers. And the last thing going on with her is that she has this rattle in her ear that started when she ate the first jalapeno. She thinks it's a seed, and she can feel something like sprouting in her brain. And she's always got her finger in her ear trying to dig it out, and she just can't quite get to it. She's always feeling like she's just pushing it further in. What I'm saying is that this all feels like a ticking time bomb. You're just waiting for the explosion. There is a sense of urgency here, and I think the book is trying to also build a sense of urgency with her money situation by often like very matter-of-factly and clearly telling us exactly how much money she needs at any given point, and I don't feel like that was really adding on to the tension in the book. Quite a few times in the first like quarter of this book, it would say, this is how much money I have in my account. This is how much money I have in my live cast account. This is how much money I need for rent. This is how much money I need for my student loans. And that just didn't add anything. It is already tense enough, you know? In one of her first couple days of this streamathon, a huge streamer in the top 100 has like almost 1 million followers and also is in the eating hot pepper niche of streaming. He joins her stream. Everybody gushes over him and they start like a DMing relationship. Not relationship. There is never any sense of romance between the two of them. He is kind of like a mentor, and she is someone who finds it very hard to like listen to authority or have anyone tell her what to do. And so she's not super receptive to his wanting to be her mentor, but she does kind of allow it. He gives her advice on streaming, about the calls to action to get more donations, and also about eating hot peppers. And she's kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. But she does take all of his advice. Dell goes to a different grocery store and she gets a habanero, and she gets them to actually donate money to her so she doesn't have to steal it. And she plans on eating it that night. During this day, one of the very first viewers that she had, Excelsior 404, has been private messaging her and kind of threatening her, both using the route of like, I've given you the most money and you owe me attention, and also, I know your full name from when you posted that link earlier, and I know everything that happened with you and Daisy. I know the truth. You're lying to everyone, and I will expose you if you don't give me attention and send me like a photo of your boobs. We know at this point that Daisy is in a coma because she overdosed and that Dell was the one to call the ambulance, but we don't really know anything else. It seems like there is a lot more, considering the fact that Excelsior 404 brings up that there are like many news articles that he's found about this situation. When she eats the first habanero, it is a lot spicier than the jalapeno, like by an order of fucking magnitude, and she wants to give up. She wants to end the stream, and she's seen that famous streamer Hot Pat of Butter, who we'll probably just call Hot Pat or Patrick, he left the stream. And anytime anyone logs off, it kind of fucks her up. She feels abandoned and she feels like she's done something wrong, and she also feels angry. She is an extraordinarily confrontational person. So when he logs off, she wants to give up. And the habanero, it's really hot. She wants to give up, but he comes back and she manages to eat 5 habaneros. Again, she has a fucking stomach ulcer. Like, this is torture for her on another level, more than it would be for the regular person. But she raises $160. And she then says, the highest donator will pick what I'm going to do tomorrow. And Hot Pat and Excelsior 404, they get into a bidding war that ends with Excelsior giving her $200 and saying, tomorrow you need to put a habanero up your vagina. He's now like full on sexually harassing her publicly, not just in their private DMs. He logs off, and then Dell immediately goes over to Lee's house, destroys their toilet, and then has dinner with Lee. We get to see a little bit more of Dell and Lee's very charming dynamic. Lee is very like hospitable and kind and welcoming and open, but also not afraid to say no. And then Dell is someone who's not afraid to take things from Lee and not afraid to be told no. It's a dynamic so unfamiliar to me in my life of these two like extroverted, confident, comfortable with themselves people that I really enjoyed reading about. At this point in the story, before Dell goes completely off the deep end, they seem to have like pretty healthy communication with a heavy dose of flirting in there as well. Dell hasn't been able to get her last paycheck back from the smoothie bar job. Every time she talks to this guy who runs the smoothie bar, he's like, we're a family and you weren't acting like a family member. It's so real in the worst way possible. Lee gives Dell advice to just like take the high road and, come at him like an adult and be respectful and not be like the confrontational little child that she can be. And we get to see the messages that Dell sends. And this, I think, really shows exactly the kind of person that she is interpersonally and when she feels like she's been wronged. It starts out with, "Hey, Nick, I don't like how our conversation ended. I wanted to reach out and apologize, like an adult. You've done a lot for me, and I recognize that. Nick, are you there? I can come into the shop again and talk to you in person. I'll apologize to your cousin Johnny, too. You don't have to give me the silent treatment. I'm not asking you to give me another chance or anything. I just need my last paycheck. My rent and bills are due in a few days. You're just going to screen my texts? I know you're on your phone all the time watching porn or whatever in the back office, so I know you're getting my texts. I hope you develop a late-in-life soy allergy, and your favorite show is canceled, and your wife divorced you again. You fucking fuck." You get the sense that this all took place over maybe 5 minutes. Then, after 100 pages, her mom finally manages to get her on the phone and convince her to go on a coffee date the next morning. And she cannot sleep that night, thinking about this coffee date and thinking a little bit about her childhood, which is the first glimpse that we get of her and also really of Daisy. Her mom had wanted a baby so badly, it was like haunting her dreams. So she ended up having Dell through a donor. And then 3 years later, she met Daisy's father. And it was never a secret that Daisy was the favorite child, that Daisy was conceived in the way that their mother valued. She was the golden child by virtue of being done the traditional way, even though her father left the family like just a couple of years after she was born. Dell remembers being told that she just can't compete with a baby, and so she kind of stopped trying. She thinks back to a time when she was quite young, like maybe 5 or 6, and Daisy was a baby and she was being carried by their mother as they went peach picking. And so Dell couldn't reach the good peaches on the top of the tree because her mom couldn't lift both babies and wasn't going to put Daisy down. And so Dell picked all of the lower, like kind of bruised, rotten fruit and ate so much that she threw up all over the car. She also remembers a time, and I think that this will be a really familiar story for anybody who was in Dell's situation, or maybe just who was the oldest child, where she was chasing her sister around and her sister threw a rock at her and Dell ran at her, was trying to catch her, and Daisy ended up running straight through the screen door and breaking it everywhere. And as soon as their mom came around the corner, she was like, "What did you do to your sister?" And Dell was like, "It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault." I don't know. I just thought that was real as hell. As an older sibling, I feel like that was a really recognizable situation for me. I still have dreams of being a kid and trying to convince my parents that something wasn't my fault or that I didn't do something. Once my youngest sibling, okay, Mom, don't watch this. I love you. Once my youngest sibling fell downstairs when we were at a cabin, like fell down this ladder, and immediately my mom was like asking if I pushed them. What the hell? That scene really cemented in my mind that Lior Torenberg is an oldest sister. She wakes up at like 3 or 4 in the morning after a fitful, sleepless night, and Excelsior 404 is her only viewer, and he is now fully sexually harassing her, sending her photos of his fucking penis, blackmailing her, trying to extort her. She keeps him around though, because she can't deny that he has sent her the most money and she wants more money. Once the day really starts, she goes for coffee with her mom, and her mom is mostly just pressuring her to go and see Daisy and also to go back to NYU in the fall because Dell dropped out of NYU when the incident that caused Daisy's coma happened. Dell gets out of going to visit Daisy and of hanging out with her mom for longer by saying she has to go to work at her job at the smoothie bar that she's been fired from. She obviously didn't tell her mom that. So her mom drops her off there and she goes into her boss's office in the back because he's not there. And she logs into his computer and she posts... She says, "Free smoothies for all bottoms during Pride Month." She's been streaming this entire time. Often she just puts the stream in her back pocket and people just stick around, which I think is crazy and I don't believe it, but whatever. She then goes home and she's going to do the habanero in the vagina thing that Excelsior 404 bet on her doing. And he says, "I'll pay you $500 to do it." And then when she does it, he only pays her $200, and she is humiliated and so angry at this. Like I said, she has major issues with authority, with being told what to do, and she doesn't like that he's flaunting his control here, that he said he would do something and now he's only doing 200 and he'll give her the rest of it if she does this, this, and that. So this is when she finally manages to bring herself to block this guy, even though he says, I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna expose you to everyone. Then Hot Pat, the famous streamer, he starts messaging her and saying, let's do a collaboration. Let's get together. Let's eat this spicy burger at this restaurant. It'll be great for your stream. Even though he's being really supportive, he's looking out for her, she has to like fully restrain herself from lashing out at him and saying something like, who are you to give me advice? Like everything everyone does that isn't just perfectly validate her in every way is very angering for her. And she is confrontational to the point of constantly shooting herself in the foot. So that seed that she's been feeling rattling around in her brain, driving her crazy, she now believes is reading her thoughts and communicating them to the hundreds of dollars worth of plants in her apartment. So she takes all of these plants down to the park and tries to sell them there. And while she's there, she makes like maybe $80 or something like that. She runs into an old friend from NYU who starts talking to her about Daisy, and she literally runs away from him. She leaves hundreds of dollars worth of plants just in the park, and she runs back home to avoid this conversation. A couple of hours later, she goes and meets Hot Pat for this collaboration, eating a ghost pepper burger in this restaurant, and she gets there and it's like kind of a big production. Like she can tell that he has called ahead of time, that they've closed off the restaurant for the two of them. Hot Pat is a professional streamer in the sense that like he knows how to turn it on for the camera and he knows how to set Dell up for success and for more donations, but she keeps shooting him down. She will not talk about Daisy. There's like 10,000 viewers and she's certain that Excelsior 404 is one because even though she's blocked him, it's all done through Hot Pat's stream and he should still be able to watch them. So she's like looking at all of the names going by so fast and she's waiting for his name to pop up. Then the burger doesn't really end up being all that spicy and she's panicking watching each of their burgers whittle down and knowing that once they're done, the donations will stop. So she pulls out 2 ghost peppers that she has brought with her and they eat those. And it's brutal and it's torture and that's exactly what the viewers want. And this is what makes her break the top 100,000 streamer rank, which is a goal she had from the beginning. They also make over $4,000 here. So it's a huge success and she has now gained a ton more viewers. She has like on average 50 viewers, which is huge. It sounds like nothing, but it actually is really big. The next day, Dell is feeling on top of the world and she goes into Lee's apartment to rifle through their pantry and steal more food from them because she has literally nothing in her tiny little mini fridge in her windowless box of an apartment. I cannot emphasize that enough. And they have a confrontation. There has been this building tension between Dell and Lee. Every time they see each other, Dell is a little bit more abrasive, a little bit more rude, and Lee expresses concern for Dell, which is not something that Dell can handle because she feels like Lee is telling her what to do. This confrontation is about a death certificate that has been sent to Lee by Excelsior 404. And it's pretty fucking clear that this is Daisy's death certificate, though it doesn't explicitly say that. So you're like, okay, Daisy has been dead this entire time. But then when Dell leaves Lee's apartment, all of the people on stream are saying the thing that you need to do today is go and visit your sister in the hospital. We want to see Daisy. And so Dell listens to them. She obeys. She kind of breaks into the hospital. She slips in without getting like a visitor's pass. And Daisy seems to be in the bed, in her room, hooked up to all the tubes and wires and stuff. Though she only shows the stream Daisy's feet. So you're like, okay, Daisy is alive. Except you don't really believe it. You don't really ever understand Dell to be a reliable narrator, and especially you don't when she runs into the head neurologist, which she calls a redundant title, which I thought was awesome. And the head neurologist stops her and speaks to her about Daisy in no uncertain terms in the past tense. Though Dell never switches. She continues talking about Daisy in present tense. She never acknowledges that Daisy is obviously dead. She just thinks this guy's such an asshole. He's already given up on her. You think back to all of these times her mom has called her and left these voicemails begging her to go and visit Daisy, and you realize that she was begging her to go and visit Daisy's grave. There was even this part that was so explicitly clear when her mom said, we need to start talking about headstones, please answer me. And you think this is just because the doctors have said that Daisy is dead, but it was actually because Daisy is already in the ground. Dell runs out of the hospital. She walks through New York City and she walks past this memorial for this girl who was hit by a car, and she sees these like kerosene candles, and she starts saying to her stream, how much would you donate for me to set myself on fire? And some of the original people are like, please don't set yourself on fire, like we love this stream. But a lot of the newer viewers are like, oh, I'd give you $100 if you set yourself on fire. And so she does. She sets her arm on fire, and she immediately thinks to herself, wow, this is really hot, it's burning through my arm really quickly. And then does not jump into the fountain that she's right beside. She instead appeals to the viewers and says, donate more money or I'll let it keep burning. I can't describe to you how stressful it was for her to light herself on fire, be like, oh, this is a lot worse than I was anticipating, and then see the line break and dialogue coming from her. What do you mean you're saying something? Get in the fountain. She maybe gets like first degree burns. She gets really lucky. She says it feels just kind of like a really terrible sunburn. And then that night she gets lost in thought, and we get the story of what happened to Daisy told in this very interesting way, where Dell is saying, if my younger sister came to visit me in New York City, I wouldn't go to a club with her. And if I did go to a club with her, I wouldn't get cocaine from some random guy. And if we did get cocaine from some random guy, I would try it first and make sure she was okay. And if I was feeling sick and didn't really want to snort cocaine, I would make sure that I watched her the entire night. And then if my sister came and visited me and she snorted cocaine from some random guy in a club bathroom after we let her in with my roommate's fake ID, and then I lost sight of her in the crowd, I wouldn't keep dancing. I wouldn't think she's probably fine. I would go and look for her. And then if I were to find her unconscious on a chair, I would call an ambulance. I wouldn't call a taxi and wrangle her back to my apartment and into my bed. And even if I did, by the time we got to the apartment, if she still wouldn't wake up, I would call an ambulance. I wouldn't get her into her pajamas and fall asleep beside her. And even if I did get her into her pajamas, I wouldn't fall asleep. I would stay watching her and taking care of her all night. I'm obviously telling it to you in a really fucking clunky way that is not exactly how the book does it, but I think it's a very good way to express Dell's denial of what happened and also immense guilt and regret over what happened. It's at this point also that we learn that Daisy was 17 when she died of this fentanyl overdose. And I mean, Dell really did do absolutely everything wrong. But we also are more understanding Dell as being 20 years old. She doesn't really feel 20 in this book. I think that might be because I've read some books recently with younger narrators and they felt so young. Tinfoil Butterfly, the book club pick for November, that is the most 18-year-old voice of a narrator I have ever read. This doesn't really feel like that. I feel like Dell could be anywhere between like 22 and 28. And in this story, when we're finally learning what happened to Daisy, she feels very, very 20 years old. So even in her narrative, in her inner voice, Dell is still not really recognizing the truth. She is not acknowledging her own lies or what is really going on in her life. So the next day, Hot Pat convinces her to join the New York City pepper eating contest. The world record holder who joins every year and fucking sweeps, he's not doing it this year. So Dell maybe has a chance at winning, even though I think it's how many Carolina Reapers you can eat in 1 minute, and that is like the hottest pepper ever, and not a pepper that she's ever even tried. So you don't really think that she's gonna get the 20K, but once she gets there, it becomes a little bit more in reach. Like, there's only 4 or 5 contestants. One drops out. One of them only eats 1 pepper. You have to eat the peppers and then stay on stage for 60 seconds afterwards. The first woman who eats a whole bunch of peppers, she doesn't manage to stay on stage. So it's really just between Dell and like 2 other contestants. And as it's closing in on Dell, she looks into the crowd and you're thinking like, oh my God, this might actually go well for her. And she sees that guy who bought the plants from her earlier in the book. And it's like a light bulb moment where she's like, oh, that's Excelsior 404. And yet she manages to do it all in spite of him. He has been haunting her. The threat of his presence has been always like just floating above her head. And now you think this is going to ruin it, and then it doesn't. She hates this guy and she thinks, what a fucking dick. Who does he think he is coming here stalking me? And she eats a ton of peppers, like an impressive amount of peppers. She stays on stage for the 60 seconds, and then she runs straight to the bathroom and absolutely destroys the toilet. And when she comes out of the bathroom, there he is, Excelsior 404, or Casper, the guy who bought the plants from her. And he is threatening to dox her and to expose her to literally everyone. And she thinks back to his account that she had scrolled through way earlier in the beginning and how he was following all of these like conspiracy theorists. And she realizes that this is a threat that he has leveled against someone before. That he's all about uncovering the truth and exposing plots against him or against people like him. And he donated money to her and now he can feel like a martyr. And he's like, you need to give me my money back. You need to give everybody all of the money back that's been donated to you. At this point, she's at like $20,000, but Dell will not be told what to do. And so she sends him back $1 and basically I think she puts a message that says, go fuck yourself. And then she walks away over to the stage where she comes in second place. And it's honestly, it's kind of funny. It's not like this devastating moment where this other guy beat her out. She had eaten like 33 grams of pepper and he ate like 85. She was like, it wasn't even close. I can't be mad at that. 85 is an incredible amount of pepper to eat. When she steps off the stage, she goes to meet up with Hot Pat and she can see in his face that Excelsior has exposed her and that he knows Daisy has been dead for this entire time. And now it switches to, yeah, okay, so what? Maybe I lied a little, but most of it was true. Just the date of death was wrong. And her inability to take any responsibility is frustrating. It is insufferable at this point. You are tired of Dell. You are tired of this character who won't do anything to help herself and who is a dick to absolutely everyone in her life, shutting them all out. But you also at the same time feel some amount of empathy for her. I mean, like she says, she just kind of wanted to live in a world where everything was fixable, where Daisy was still alive, where she could have done something. She goes back to her apartment, life kind of ruined, and she is shitting blood, like a lot of blood, like blood that she cannot staunch. Lee calls her an ambulance. She's taken in for emergency surgery because her stomach has been perforated by this ulcer that she's had for the entire book. And then it goes to a week later where she is now living with her mom, recovering from surgery, and also like kind of recovering mentally and financially. She also has taken some responsibility. She has returned all of the money that was donated to her. She reaches out to Hot Pat and she says, I gave all your viewers back all of their money. I gave you back all of your money. I hope you can understand. And he kind of just says, I don't. And that's it for the two of them. Dell and her mom then visit Daisy's grave. And this is the scene in the book that really got to me. It's kind of a feat for a book to make me shed a tear or two. And I don't remember the last time I cried at a book, but this one hurt a lot here. They get to the cemetery and Dell, like I said, has had this mantra of, we saw her hand move. And she says to her mom something that every time she's talked to her mom, she has said to her mom, she says, we saw her hand move, right? And her mom says, oh yes. And then immediately says, I don't know what I saw. That's sad as fuck. That is really fucking sad. A little while later, Lee comes to visit Dell. They kind of make up, though Lee is still angry at Dell and says it's really hard to be angry at somebody who's just had emergency surgery, but I am angry at you. Their relationship is obviously healing. Lee is giving Dell a second chance. The book ends with the two of them kind of driving around in the middle of the night. Lee has come to visit, driving around in Dell's mom's car, and Dell's mom is leaving all these voicemails. That's the entire last 3 pages of the book is just like voicemails from Dell's mom being like, where are you? You need to come back. And then, oh, actually, I can see you pulling into the driveway. Oh, you and your friend are laughing. That's really cute. I think it's showing us here at the end that Dell is not in a great situation, living with her very overbearing and filled with anxiety mother, but also a mother that we can kind of sympathize with that isn't just like pure outright evil. I think it's kind of open. I think you can see Dell as both getting a lot worse and possibly getting a lot better. And it's likely that she'll get better, especially considering that she is now starting to face her sister's death and she's making up with Lee, who was really a stable force in her life. A force that she needed, as you can tell, because her life and this book is pure, unadulterated fucking chaos. I thought that this book was such an awesome premise that was like exactly right up my alley, but I didn't think it was perfect. And I have had a hard time articulating exactly why not, because I enjoyed it so much. I think it is kind of just like the curse of the debut. And I'm thrilled to see what else Lior Torenberg is going to write and what else the cover designer is going to create. Can you fucking believe that? I love this book. I found it to be very engaging and hard to put down. I read it so quickly, and it does pull you through it. There's a lot of forward momentum here. Though Dell was insufferable and sometimes unforgivable, I cared about her and I cared about what happened to her. I thought it did a really good job with the streamer chat portion of the book. A lot of this is chats from her viewers, and I felt like it not only captured like the culture and the language and the different personalities of people in a streamer's chat, it also flowed very well. And that was true in the DMs as well. I don't know if you can see it because my camera doesn't autofocus, but a lot of the dialogue is like this, like screen name, colon, text, screen name, colon, text. And that can be very hard to read. It can be very, very stilted. And I didn't find that here. I thought that the voices were different enough from each other that you could always tell who was talking, and so you only really had to read the dialogue part. I always knew who was talking without reading their names, and I think that can be very hard to accomplish and was done really well in this book. I also found myself getting like almost attached to the viewers that had been there for a long time. Like there's this one girl in chat who can't stop saying I live in Vancouver whenever it's even remotely appropriate to say that, and it was so funny. Like at some points Dell would be like, do you work for the fucking tourism board? Like, what is wrong with you? And there's a moment where Dell threatens to block this person because Dell loves blocking people in the stream. And I felt heartbroken. I was like, please don't block her. I love her. A few of the viewers also show up to the hot pepper eating contest. And you're like, oh, like this is cute. Like, look at you. And it's also kind of crazy. Like, wow, you're a real person with a human body, you know? It captures that really well. Dell was a progressively difficult character to follow. She's confrontational. She's quick to anger. She's selfish. She's illogical. She's constantly in these shitty situations that she has put herself in and then won't make choices to get out of, even when the obvious choice is right there. And at the end, you realize even more how somewhat unforgivably selfish she can be, and yet you still feel for her on some level. You want her to face consequences, and you want her to grow up, and you want her to make better choices and get better. I did find myself wanting to know more about Dell outside of just this one moment and like some sparse memories that mostly centered around Daisy. Knowing how the book ends, I understand why we're kept at that distance, but I feel like it could have been a little bit more impactful or even more interesting if I had known more clearly whether or not this is just like what Dell is like all the time, or if she is truly in a moment of crisis from the start of this story. I know why she had a lot of walls up, but I just wanted a few of them to be broken down. I wanted to know more about her outside of this 1 week in her life, though I think it is impressive that Torenberg managed to get me to care about her as much as I did without that. I think there was a lot of room for improvement with the writing of this story. On the sentence level and like word choice level, it could be very repetitive. There's a lot of like lists and an overuse of what would you say? Like over and then adjective, over large or over full. That's just like a pet peeve of mine. I don't love saying things like that. And it's used a lot, especially in the first half of this book. I feel like every 5 pages, something was described as over something. There were a few really great lines of tenderness and insight and humor, but most of it was pretty simple, like language. And I think that would have been more fine if this book had been a little bit more thematically complex. I think that is the gap between a 4 and a 5 star that I can't quite put my finger on with this. I feel like if a book is going to be written pretty simply, it needs to have themes that it's exploring. Which, like, this book does have themes, but I think it just needs to have more. You know what I mean? And if it's not gonna have themes, then it needs to be written a little bit more beautifully. But as it is, this is mostly a story and not like a commentary, though it does have some things to say about like internet culture that made me itchy, like made me so incredibly uncomfortable. I think when I am typically reading books about social media, it's about like Instagram, and that doesn't really have jack shit to do with like what I do on social media as like a book reviewer on YouTube. This felt a little bit closer to my job, and that was like uncomfortable, and I hated it. And I also loved having someone shine a light on some of the terrible parts of it. Or like not the terrible parts of the job itself, because being a Twitch streamer is so incredibly different, but more like what it does to your brain. For me personally, this book was above a 4, somewhere between a 4 and a 4.5. I think objectively it's more like a 3.75, but there is an audience for this, and that audience is me. And I loved it. And I love the cover. I can't say that enough. And I'm really excited to see what Lior Torenberg does next, because this was fucking great. It was great, but it wasn't perfect. And I think that she has the ability to write something perfect. And I'm so excited to watch her grow as an author. And I think that you should look out for this book when it comes out in January. I'm gonna go finish up reading hard copy, or maybe I'm gonna get to halfway and then give you an update then, because I've been sitting here for like an hour recording and this is brutal. My mouth hurts. I got my flu shot yesterday. My arm hurts. I'm miserable. So maybe I'll update you halfway through this one, but this is also fascinating and I'm excited to talk to you about it. I'll see you soon. Hello there. I have finished Hard Copy, a book with the tagline, "This is a story of girl meets printer," that both is and is not that. That is both less than that and more than that. If you're someone who's looking for like a really weird book, you'll probably be disappointed with this. But at the same time, if you're someone who's interested in the premise of a book that's about a woman who falls in love with a printer, you might like parts of this. I think it won't meet your expectations necessarily, but you will still likely enjoy it. And that's where I found myself. I'm going to talk more about my thoughts after I tell you everything that happens in this. So if you don't want to hear that, skip this part. The book begins with the unnamed main character walking through the streets of a city in the Netherlands. I just assume Amsterdam, but it really could be anything. And she's looking for a package that her coworkers have been pressuring her to pick up. A package that was addressed to her, but sent to her office's old address. She has no idea what's inside it, but for some reason, it's important. She thinks back to a few days before when she was doing the same thing, looking for this package, walking up and down the street, going into businesses and asking them if they had received it, where she almost died just like lying on the pavement. And as it turned out, she learned she was allergic to exertion. She could go into anaphylactic shock if she got too stressed out or too worked up. So obviously she didn't find the package then, and she doesn't find it on this trip either. So she heads back to work. At work, she's the lowest paid employee in this startup company. She works printing stuff off, and she works in this very hot, small office, and she points her fan at the printer, not at herself, because she really likes this printer. It's not going to get exciting. It's not going to get raunchy. Don't let your mind go there, even though the story of girl meets printer would lead you to believe that that's where it goes. It's not. She just really likes her printer, okay? She loves the printer. She loves being with the printer. She thinks that the printer can communicate with her. She sees him almost as like a baby. Like he's dependent on her. He has very few means of communication, and it's on her to figure out what he needs and what he wants and what he's trying to say. He's been having some issues lately where he's only printing 8 papers at a time, and she feels that she's nursing him back to health. There are these pretty frequent italicized interludes where she's kind of monologuing about like capitalism and the state of the world and being lower class and living in a lower class neighborhood while either going to school or working with the middle class, and how weird that is for her. It's definitely less of like a bitter envy of upper class people and more a curiosity of what she would be like if she had been born rich. She feels very impacted by her lower class upbringing and by the neighborhood that she grew up in. Within these little monologues that is her speaking to the printer, she's telling this story of the neighborhood that she grew up in and of this sexual predator that lived on her street, whose car was set on fire by the children in the neighborhood who were sending a message and kind of like begging for help. But we're only really getting that story in bits and pieces throughout the book. The next day, her package has been officially delivered, and she goes to the address that it's said to have been delivered at, and nobody answers. She speaks a lot of this external pressure to get this package back to the office, but we never actually see that. She keeps mentioning how her coworkers have told her that she needs to get this package, she feels below them, and yet that's never brought up by anyone. And she's always thinking that it's going to be. Every time someone comes into her office, she's like, oh my God, he's going to berate me for not having the package. And no one has brought it up yet. And yet she's feeling this immense, all-consuming anxiety about not being able to locate this package. So much so that it's really hard for her to focus on work, especially because she has been made to take over one of her coworkers' jobs, of course, with no rise in pay. While her coworker is on vacation, she's answering customer service emails and being berated by customers all day, every day. We see all the small and large dehumanizations of that job and also just of office culture in general. Like her boss calls her for a meeting. Of course, she's like, oh my God, he wants to talk to me about the package and how I don't have the package. And then he keeps pushing off the meeting. She's totally at his whim. And it is so stressful for her not to know what the meeting is about and not to know when it actually is going to happen. She's trying to pick up on all these little hints like, oh, we're doing it in the conference room. That means that it's something huge. That means I'm going to be fired. It's very clear how little control this character has. He finally postpones the meeting to a Monday, and we never see anything of her weekend. We don't see her home life at all until far later in the book. She is the sum of her job. And so are all her coworkers as well. Nobody has a name at her office. They're all just their position title. Monday comes around and there's a huge storm that she wades through, and she does overexert herself and have to like sit down, calm herself down, and try not to panic. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling cycle with this overexertion thing because she is a very anxious person. And so she's always anxious about overexerting herself or about getting too anxious. And then that just keeps going and keeps building until she is too anxious, and then she gets anxious about whether or not she's experiencing symptoms of anaphylactic shock. But she manages to wade through this storm and get to the place where her package is. And she knocks on the door, and the guy opens it, and she can see that his apartment is filled with packages, but he does bring her package. She doesn't open the package. She brings it back to her office and lets it sit there. And then she finally has her meeting with the boss. The meeting is not about the package. The meeting is about her phone usage. He says that all of her coworkers have been hearing her talking on the phone, and that like the phone bills don't lie, and he can see that she's been spending a lot of time on the phone and that her job really doesn't require any phone use at all. And she's like, I'm literally never on the phone. I'm just talking to the printer. But she obviously can't tell him I'm just talking to the printer. She denies it, but he says, you know, it seems like you're burnt out. We're going to put you on leave for a little bit so you can come back and do your best. Again, even with this weeks-long leave, we see nothing of her home or who she is outside of her work. She is only ever at work or heading to work. Until we get to part 2, which is her extended leave. She thought she was going for a week. Now it's been like a couple of months. She has nothing else in her life besides work and besides her printer, who is obviously still at the office. So she's still monologuing to him in her head. She's obviously very alone and very isolated. At one point, she takes out the garbage, and when she comes back to her apartment door, there's a sticky note on the door. And this, similar to the package, throws her entire life into disarray. And it's not important what the contents of the note are, same way it wasn't important what the contents of the package was, because we still don't know either of those things. What's important is the disruption, how this change in routine and expectation unsettles her. And my God, does it unsettle her. Now she feels watched. She feels like her sanctuary has been broken. After weeks of leave, she heads back to the office for some coaching sessions with a career coach. On her way there, she is hit by a garbage truck. She's uninjured. The garbage man brings her into the truck. He drives her back to her office. And when she gets to the street, she's like, my office has literally disappeared. And she panics, thinking that she has like severed her ties with reality, and then realizes, oh, it's on the next street over. The streets just look the same because the water in the canals is the same shade of brown. Clearly, very little stability in her life, very little control. She goes through this coaching session. It's kind of just this guy yapping at her. There's a lot of that with men in this story. This is commenting on like everyday experiences of misogyny inside and outside of the workplace. When they finish their coaching session, she's like, I have to do something. I have to do something to take back control into my life. So she sneaks up into her old office and she takes the package, but she doesn't open it. And then when she finally builds herself up enough to open it, she realizes that she can't open it without a screwdriver, which she doesn't have. She meets up with her best friend in here, a friend from her childhood in that lower class neighborhood, and she wants to ask her friend if the package and the note have something to do with the fire that the two of them were the culprits of setting when they were children. But she doesn't bring herself to do that because she's like, I'm pretty sure my friend's gonna think I'm crazy. And like, her friend wouldn't necessarily be wrong. She's definitely becoming more and more disconnected from reality, spending more time monologuing in her mind to the printer. Mostly that is monologues about the past, about what her and her friend did, about this neighborhood they grew up in, and the people in it. Somewhere in here, she's brought back to Earth by her neighbor knocking on her door in a panic. Her neighbor believes that she has locked herself out of her apartment and is freaking the fuck out, and the narrator is kind of like the calm, collected voice of reason here. They go to investigate, and they realize that the neighbor has got the door wrong. She's not knocking on the right apartment. Her door is still open. The narrator takes this moment where she has helped the neighbor to now ask the neighbor for help and to say, do you know anything about this note that was left on my door? She has not removed the note from her door. And the neighbor blows her off, is like, you're being delusional, you're being silly. And she's kind of thinking, you were just being delusional and silly, and I entertained you. Are you not going to give me that same grace back? And this frustration, this anger has now finally brought her back to her body, back to the real world. And she's like, you know what? I'm finally going to go and I'm going to get a screwdriver to open up this package. She has taken some steps to get the screwdriver, but never like fully just bit the bullet to do it. Like she looked up where the hardware store is and she was like, that's part of the way there. But she knew that she was never really going to do it until this moment where she takes the package out and she heads out to the hardware store and she runs into the garbage man. So part 2 ends with her and her friend, the garbage man, heading to the hardware store. Part 3 is told from the perspective of the all-seeing, omniscient printer. We learn from the printer about the intruder or the invader. This is one of her coworkers who she refers to as marketing. She hates this guy. He's always bothering her. The printer knows, though, that when the narrator is not in her office, he is. He comes in there privately to cry. And he kind of orchestrated her being put on leave. He's the one that sent her that package and made her feel like it was really important for her to find it so that she would spend long times out of the office. Also, the printer calls her my partner. It is reciprocated, and that's awesome. Because he's omniscient, he tells us the entire story of this town local pedophile whose car the narrator had burnt down when she was a child. Someone that she knew, kind of like a mean older girl, had been impregnated by this man, and her friend had set his car on fire to send a message to the adults of the neighborhood. And it worked. He was investigated and he did move away, but so did the girl who she was trying to protect. And that kind of like muddled the morality of it for her. And it's why she's so stuck on it still to this day. Okay, then her office gets taken over by another coworker and the printer is put out on the street. And the last thing that we hear from him is that he's being carried away by arms that he feels he can trust, because again, he is omniscient. He is experiencing everything in the world all at once. Part 4, last part of the book. We're back to our original narrator. She's different though. Something has changed with her. When it first goes back to her, you're wondering whether or not this is actually her. She's talking about like wanting to be remembered when she dies by the luxuries of life, which is so far off from the woman who really only had things to say about class and capitalism before this. She's heading back to her office for the first time in months for a meeting, likely to be fired. You're pretty sure to be fired. So is she. When she gets there, it's pitch black. Everything is turned off. And it's kind of like this weird, surreal moment. Nobody is commenting on the fact that all of the lights and all of the machinery is off in the office. And they're all there. Everyone in her office is in the conference room, which is strange because you thought it was going to be like a one-on-one meeting where she's fired. Turns out the boss comes in and he says, isn't this timing crazy? The power went out at the same time we're having this meeting. Anyway, we're downsizing. 60% of you are fired. Even though he doesn't say who it is that's fired, she knows that she's in there. So she goes on the hunt for the printer. When she goes back to her office, she sees that it has been completely renovated for this new guy. So she goes to the storage closet. She sees the printer isn't there. She's devastated. Then we jump back in time to her in the garbage truck heading to the hardware store to get the screwdriver. Her and the garbage man opened the package together, and when they first opened it, she thought that it was filled with like congealed blood, but he points out that it was actually filled with ink cartridges that had leaked, and she was like, oh, this was a gift. She spends the final few pages of the book with no idea what to do with her life now. Her job was kind of her only purpose. She's been broken down by the capitalistic society that she lives in, and then she gets a knock on the door, and it is the garbage man, and he says, I think I found your guy. He's the only person that she has told about the printer. And he is the one that saw the printer outside of her office on the curb and carried it away. And she follows him down and she sees her printer and she thinks, damn, out of context, like, it was kind of crazy that I thought I could talk to this thing. Like, I thought he was communicating back to me. What the hell was wrong with me? So it's like this moment of elation for you where she has found the printer again. They have been reunited. And then even though you know that the printer is omniscient, she's like, why do I even care about this thing that much? The very last line of the book is her taking the printer up to her apartment and turning it on. And that is Hard Copy by Fien Veldman. So this book was less fun than Just Watch Me, but it was more thematically dense. So I feel like it kind of filled in the holes of what I was missing from the last book. It had things that it was trying to say about class and capitalism and work culture and violence and misogyny, and it made you put in some effort at least to break through to them. I thought it was insightful and intriguing and somewhat like cerebral with a pleasant absurdity to it, but I didn't think it went as dark or as character focused as I would have wanted from a book with this premise. I thought it wrote anxiety and the paralysis of anxiety very well, but any other emotion in this story fell quite flat and was written very simplistically. I always thought that there was like a layer of plexiglass between me and this character's world. Like, I want to know how it feels viscerally for her to be away from her printer, and I never got that. I think that's because this falls into something that I'm realizing is a pattern through this book, which is like specifically European weird, crazy person fiction, where it's like the character, the protagonist, is so detached, like so undefined, it's almost fuzzy. I'm thinking of The Driver's Seat and The Mustache. I feel like both of those books had a very similar voice and tone to this one, which is kind of like serious, flat, to the point, kind of emotionless, but also with some humor in the absurdity. I like how this book twisted everyday mundane absurdities into something different, like forced you to take a step back and look at them from a new perspective because you're seeing them through her obscured lens, but also a step away from her obscured lens because you're so detached from her. Like the very familiar strangeness of how men speak to her, of being a cog in the machine, of work culture. It kind of does what Sayaka Murata does really well without over-exaggerating these things, which works in Murata's works, but I don't think would make sense in this book. Though I do wish this was a little bit more about being obsessed with a printer, I actually liked the fact that it throws us in already at like the peak or like the plateau of her obsession with the printer. It's not this building up. She's already there. They already have an established relationship. I was expecting something totally different, and I actually found that to be a little bit more fun here. This is not a story of her becoming obsessed with a printer. That isn't the cusp of her spiral. It's just kind of part of who she is, and I think that sets this book apart from other obsession stories. While, like I said, this book had many things to say, a lot of things that were included in here were included kind of just to build a more clear picture without specifically, explicitly saying anything. In another book, I think I would have been irritated by that. This kind of meandering, everything that's included not having the same level of significance, but I think that it works here, this like building out from a vignette, if that makes sense. The writing is very simple and easy to read, so you don't feel bogged down by these details that aren't technically necessary, and they're often interesting, despite not always being like totally relevant. Because it didn't mess with the pace of the book, I found it to be not just forgivable that not everything was that important, but actually kind of fun. I think that it added something to this. Anyone who's read this book will tell you that it isn't that weird, and it's not really about a narrator being uncouth or making everyone around her uncomfortable, but it is suffocating to be inside this narrator's head and to be in her world, even if you're kept at a distance, and so I felt like I was satisfied enough with it. That is also partly because I read Sky Daddy by Kate Folk this year about a woman who's sexually obsessed with airplanes, and now I know that no book that could be like Sky Daddy will ever live up to it. So I go in with honestly like pretty fucking low expectations. Sky Daddy ruined reading for me. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Nothing has been the same since. So basically, at the end of the day, I would recommend hard copy to people who have read Sky Daddy and are aware that nothing will ever live up to that or be even close to as good as that was. I think if you go in with your expectations a little bit tempered, you'll have fun with this. And it's very, very quick and easy to read. That's the end of the video. I have nothing left to say. This is one of many videos that I have made and will continue to make about narrators who are weird and obsessive and losing their minds. One of whom was in love with a printer, the other was a Twitch streamer. You tell me what's worse. Okay, bye.